Welcome back to the podcast, Digitally Transformed. I'm your host, Melissa, and today we are going to jump into part 2 of last week's podcast episode with Stephen Webster. We talked about the Great Resignation, and we're still diving into how to retain, keep employees happy in that modern workplace environment, and just the different tools and things that you can utilize as an executive. So let's jump into it, and I hope you enjoy.
The important thing, and what you mentioned there, the important thing is to read it and learn about it and hear about it, but most importantly, to implement it and to make it a habit and to be reflective on that, right? Because change is hard. Change is hard for many people. You just want to continue to be the way you've always been. But when you have the love language book or you have the predictive index, it's really about taking what you learn there and then applying it to those relationships and applying it to your life. You can transform any of these things. You can make them much more positive. It's just a matter of taking the responsibility and doing it.
I totally agree with that. From an executive level or, a management level, how can they use this to their advantage to better their relationships with employees?
It's really about being able to have those transparent and safe communications, right? It's getting to know the people that you're working with and do it. Employees want transparency. They want to be trusted, right? They want employers who recognize that managing in the Zoom economy is different, right? They want bosses who aren't skeptical around who they are. So all of these tools and having these tools in place, Melissa, are able to remove many of those barriers. If you think about how when we were in the office or with coworkers, lots of times our experience with a coworker was driven by, did I have a good experience with them or a bad experience with them? So if you had one or two bad experiences with a coworker, Melissa, would you be looking forward to the third experience or the fourth experience? No, you might modify your behavior. You might not invite that person to a meeting. You might avoid them walking down the hallway, right? There's a variety of different things that we as just humans, we don't want that risk, or we might not want that controversy or that conflict, so we avoid it. So much of what this is really all about and these tools are all about is giving us the power to be able to work through those levels of conflict so that you can get to a better place. And you need to be able to get to a better place. And that's what it's all about. Employees want their boards and their leadership and their HR department to wake up to these situations and to realize that if they just listen and they pay attention, that they can make an even better business than the ones that they've made before. These tools can be extremely powerful and extremely useful. It's just a matter of adopting them and using them and making them a part of your overall culture as a business.
Right. Okay, so we've been talking a lot about this assessment, but what are some other tools and resources or things that executives or just employers in general can do to keep their teams around and happy and engaged? Any tips?
In a recent sort of people management report from actually the predictive index, right, the skills that employees are looking for in their leaders and managers, Melissa, are confidence, being an effective communicator, being very honest, having the ability to delegate tasks, and a person who actually asks for feedback, but doesn't just ask for it, actually acts on it, Melissa. And this is one of these other things, right? We've all been in a lot of organizations that do employee surveys and, let's do another employee survey. And the next thing you know is the employee presents their results and gives their honest opinion, and nothing happens from them. So the result of what was a good idea of taking a survey turns out to be a negative idea because nothing gets implemented or nothing ever gets communicated or transacted upon.
And then at that point, the employees know that their voices are being heard, but nothing's changing or feedback doesn't hold value to the employer.
That's correct. Yeah. So what employees are looking for from leaders, right, is leaders need to lead by example. And we touched on this a little bit earlier. It's all about leadership. It's about making sure that you can get the people who work for you to jump in that foxhole with you and go to battle with you every single day. If you're the leader standing in the foxhole and your employees are standing up around looking at you in the foxhole, the likelihood of you guys accomplishing what you want to accomplish is probably pretty low. Right. So schedule regular meetings, prioritize self-care is also another thing, right? Around making sure that we set Melissa up from success, whether that be the hours that Melissa wants to work or what Melissa needs to do during the day. You're going to get your job done. We all know you're going to get your job done, but giving you the flexibility to do that and make sure that you're doing it while contributing to the organization, but also giving you the flexibility. That's what's becoming much more important to people from an employer perspective, right? And whether work from home is one degree of flexibility, but working hours that you want to work because it's best for you is another, right? All of those types of things it's essentially personalizing your experience with the employer, which is not something that has ever really been in play. It's always kind of been soldiers marching, right, or ants marching, right. To quote an old Dave Matthews Band song. But it's really more around how do you personalize that experience. And if you think about it, it's kind of where our life has gone in the last 20 years, Melissa. It's our expectation, right? Maybe Amazon spoiled all of us, right? Maybe Amazon gave us the ability to say, hey, I bought this and I want recommendations on what else I should buy or what else I should do. But we've become a society, right, where we expect immediate feedback. We expect that's just how we live. It's how our life has changed. Everything is at the palm of our hands as it relates to getting an answer in the moment. So it's like, how do you do that from a management perspective, right? And how do you lead people in a different way? With regard to what can employers do, and I think that's kind of the fundamental question. What can employers do, right? Is they really need to create a purpose and meaning that their employees can believe in and also respect. Mm-hmm. So what this is all about fundamentally is how do you create a growth mindset organization, which is it's always going to get better, right? How do you focus on value creation? How do you make sure that it's a high level of transparency? How do I ensure that my communications are meaningful and frequent? How am I improving? What are the options that I have to improve, to grow, to stretch? Right? Great companies like Google and 3M give 15% of their time to innovation or 20% of their time to innovation. It lets employees do things that they're passionate about in addition to what their jobs are. How much training, what type of compassion and empathy does a leader have today? And really the most important thing is emotional intelligence, right? It's how emotionally intelligent is the leadership, and
just having an awareness for their employees. Correct. And the fact that they're humans and they're not machines and they have real lives. And I think that's something that our leaders do really well. There's never any shaming for leaving the office to go do something for a family event or feeling sick or taking that vacation off that you really have been needing. Not shaming your employers for human basic needs.
Right. And the ability for you to do that, though, comes because you are a trusted employee who has delivered against expectations. You have earned their trust and the organization has earned your trust. And mm-hmm. You've just hit the nail on the head, Melissa. That is the essence of what this is all fundamentally about, right? It's not having to inspect everything that Melissa does. It's being able to trust that you're going to get it done. And if you don't know how to get it done, that you're going to be able to ask a question that says, hey, I need a little help here. Can you help guide me on this thing? It's just having that level of transparent communication that just builds great teams and great employees.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with that. If someone was looking from like a leadership perspective or an executive perspective, if they were looking for a practical first step, would you say that they should reach out to someone who could help advise them with these things? Would you say that there's a tool that they should start with? What would be your recommendation for an organization just getting more in touch with their employees and just having more of a grip or an understanding on who they are and being engaged and all of those things?
Yeah, I think there's probably two lessons here at the end of the day, Melissa. One is the basic leadership lesson, is that leadership needs to change and evolve. It always has evolved, it's always changed, and some of the old ways are no longer going to work. So you need to again just be able to evolve as a leader. Make sure that you are asking your employees what it's all about. Make sure that you are taking action on that associate feedback. Make sure that the associate is seeing that you're taking action. The employers are finding pain points for their associates and trying to remove them so that they're helping them do their job better. So what employees really want is their leaders to take the time to honestly communicate to them. So it's this combination, Melissa, of leadership, which is making sure that you are becoming a modern leader in today's environment and being thoughtful, and that's emotional intelligence and all the things that you talked about earlier. And then the second piece are sort of the tools and the toolkit that you can use. And those toolkits are strategy toolkits and alignment toolkits, or predictive index, which is a whole, sort of HR objective organizational toolkit that just gets you to know your employees better, gets you to train your managers in a much different way. So it's an all-encompassing toolkit that enables you to build a better organization through transparency, training, great leadership, and really just ongoing value creation, both for the employer and for the employee. So I would say it's in those two buckets, Melissa.
Yeah, and I think another thing that we didn't really get the chance to touch on yet that I just want to bring up before we come to a close is also maintaining that relationship and deepening that relationship with your employees. Something that we've implemented over here at Infused, which I know you've gotten to take part in as being a team member, that I get the pleasure of organizing, and it's so much fun, is that we do our monthly team virtual get-togethers, and we actually organize that through this incredible app. And there are tons of really fun organized, hosted events that you could do for your team. We also have Nectar, which is a team recognition system. So let's say after this podcast, I want to say thank you to Stephen for hopping on this podcast with me. I can go ahead and send him a fun little gift card and say, thank you so much for hopping on here. It was a great time. I appreciate you taking that extra effort and just working with me on a podcast episode. So that's really fun. And those are points that you can turn into actual gift cards that we get to hand out and divvy out to different team members that have just really excelled or done a great job at something. It could even just be like, hey, we didn't work together, but I saw this thing you did. You did a great job on it. Here's a $10 gift card to Target. And then another thing that we've implemented is every week on Fridays, we have this awesome, which, you get sent to your inbox as well, Stephen. It's an email and it's called Quiz Breaker. And it's so cheap for an organization, but it's so fun. You basically get an email. It says that someone answered an icebreaker, and then you have to guess who it is. And it's always between two people on your team. And then I, at the end, get the pleasure of handing out a gift card to whoever gets the most right that week. So I think it's just finding activities like that keep your organization fun, sort of create this culture of we're humans, we're here to have fun as well. I think it just makes coming into the work week a little bit more easy, right? As opposed to coming into a job where you just don't connect with your employees, you don't ever have fun, it deepens the relationships, I think.
Yeah, no question, Melissa. I mean, you've touched on sort of another very important tool in the toolbox, right, which has to do with these engagement tools that you just mentioned. And you just mentioned 3 of them. So you have found, and thank you for doing that, you have found these tools and you've deployed them at Infused Innovations with great success. And this is just really all about, trying to personalize what has become a very business-like situation by being remote, right? Yes. So a lot of these tools give us the ability to get to know each other at a personal level. The Quiz Breaker is great every single Friday.
And it helps bring up that water cooler talk where you're like, what? I had no idea you went to a Nick Jonas concert a few years ago or a Taylor Swift. I love Taylor Swift, and you get to know someone on a human level and not just that work level. And I think that that strengthens the intimacy between the employee and the employer, and then they feel like they have that deeper relationship with their workplace.
Well, so many of those tools that you mentioned help to recreate the workplace environment. They can't replace it, but they do help to recreate it and do it in just a newer and modern way of doing it in the world that we live in today. You're no longer constrained by having a job in Rhode Island. I mean, you live in San Diego. You have a job, you work for a company in Rhode Island. I live outside of Boston. I work for a company in Rhode Island, right? So the days of having any geographical boundaries around having to go to the job have also been completely disrupted. And it is these types of tools that enable us to have that degree of camaraderie and that degree of understanding and getting to know each other in different ways. So it's all possible. It's just a matter of being open-minded to the change. And that's, I think, the most, one of the other most important messages, right, is that if you're not growing, you're dying. So you got to figure out a way to keep growing and keep moving forward and keep pushing that peanut ahead and try to get 1% better every day and do those things, because if you're stagnant, you're going to die. And, our world is moving at a much faster pace than it's ever moved before. And that pace is just accelerating. And it's important for us to try to move fast to do these things, to build great organizations like we have here at Infused.
Well, that's a great way to end this podcast. I'm going to go ahead and end it here. But I do appreciate you so much, Stephen, for coming on here and chatting about all of this stuff. I think it's so important, not only to employers, but also employees now, right? Like, these are tools that they're looking for in the workplace in order to keep employees engaged and excited and just wanting to stick around. These are really important, not only tools, but mindset hacks for them to have.
Well, thank you, Melissa. It's been great to spend time with you today.
Well, thank you, Stephen, and hopefully you'll come back on the podcast again.
I'll look forward to that.